Thank you, Zita, and welcome everyone. It's good to see so many on the call. There's a few new names, but some many familiar faces as well. So this is the 11th year of Farm Monitor for New South Wales. We run it in New South Wales as the DPI in partnership with Dairy Australia, and we've had that relationship for many years now, which is fantastic. I lead the project in New South Wales. We have a team of 13 data collectors throughout the state and 36 farmers in this financial year. So it is a national project run in all dairying regions throughout Australia. And the purpose, well, what it is, for those that aren't familiar, is it's a business analysis for it's a historical business analysis for a financial year. And it provides us with standardised and comprehensive physical and financial information on the performance of the dairy farms in the project across that year for New South Wales. It also sits as the comparative data, so the high quality comparative data that sits behind Dairy Base and the Farm Business Snapshot. So Dairy Base and Farm Business Snapshot are online tools developed by Dairy Australia and industry that are available for farmers and service providers to do their own farm reports. It's the same physical and financial information. So it's freely available to everyone. The information is also used by industry. Dairy Australia use it for background information for their situation and outlook report. The latest one just came out earlier this week, I think it was, the December report. It also provides data for their annual In Focus report. Both of those are exceptional reports, so I'd encourage you to do a search on Dairy Australia's website and find those. They've got very good industry information, statewide but national as well. For us in New South Wales, it also gives us a good understanding of how farmers have responded to the conditions that they've had to deal with within a financial year, all those internal and external forces. As I said, we've got 11 years of data, so it does give us an indication of some trends in the industry in New South Wales over time. And also we do separate the results between North and South, so we get a bit of an indication about regional differences within New South Wales. And before I go any further, I must thank the participating farms in the project over the duration of the 11 years, but particularly the farms in this financial year, the 36 farms. It's been a very challenging year, and so we really do appreciate the time and effort that they put into providing the data for these reports. So, hang on. Right. This map gives us an indication of where the farms are located within New South Wales. So we can see we've got north is our green dots, obviously, and blue is south. We have a couple of blue dots that look like they're in the north, and they are in the north, but it's a historical decision, but these farms in the north have much more in common with our southern farms in terms of sort of scale and type of farming system. So that's why they're included in the South data set. The map is the rainfall deciles from the Bureau of Meteorology for that 12-month period, the financial 12-month period, and no news to anyone, but it was an extraordinarily wet year, and we can see that all our dairying regions experienced above average rainfall across that year, to the unfortunate situation up in the north where we had some highest record rainfall figures and significant floodings, as you will all be well and truly aware. The participating farmers are anonymous and their information is de-identified. Farmers are able to obviously disclose that they are Farm Monitor farms if they so choose, but in the main, they generally don't, and they are anonymous for obvious reasons. So the benefit to the participating farms is that they get an individual farm report, and it's a really comprehensive report on their performance for that financial year with physical and financial data. We did a project earlier in the year where we looked at 10 years of Farm Monitor in New South Wales through a different lens, but part of that we produced a series of videos to explain Farm Monitor and some of the benefits. This is just a screen grab of one of these videos in which many of you may know Justin and Libby Walsh down on the South Coast. And, you know, Justin sort of articulates the benefit to him as a farmer in participating in the program and how he uses the reports sort of to do his own farm business performance review, but also when he's talking with financiers and other people about his business, it's good quality data about the performance of the business. Before we jump into the results, just a word of caution. I'm going to talk about average figures here, and we know there is no such thing as an average farm. Not one of the farms will probably have any of the numbers as an indicator in their reports. So I am talking averages, and it is an average of the 36 participating farms in the project this year only. It's not the whole of the New South Wales industry. It's a summary of the performance of 36 farms. So 18 in the north and 18 in the south data set. We do get movement of farms in and out of the project over time. Sometimes farms will opt out for various reasons. They will also opt back into the project. But, you know, because of that, we've got to be careful when we're comparing performance between years. And the other thing to remember with numbers, we're looking at numbers, but there's things that drive these numbers. Every farm is different. They all operate in a different part of the state. They've got different types of farm systems, different climates, and different resources available to them within their business. And, you know, there's people behind this, and it's people with different goals and aspirations, different management abilities that drive the performance. And not every farmer has the sole aim of being the most profitable dairy farmer in New South Wales, or, you know, as profitable as they possibly can be. So, you know, everyone dairies for different reasons. When we're looking at the performance of a farm business, we look at it through 3 different lenses. In Farm Monitor, we predominantly report on the profit position, but we also look at the cash, the profit, and the wealth position. So our cash position is obviously, you know, the liquidity of the business. Can they pay their bills throughout the year? So while it's been a very strong year in terms of milk income, milk pricing, and livestock trading conditions. So we've had good farm incomes, but we have seen increases in costs across many areas in the business, which I'll go into in a minute. So while we had a strong sort of cash flow position for the year, it was down slightly on the previous year. So by the end of the year, the net cash flow position before tax and drawings was a bit over 83,000 on average for the 36 farms, and that was down from about 110,000 the previous financial year. If we look at profit, so profit is telling us how efficiently the resources and capital in that business are being used to generate a profit. So we've obviously got, within profit, we've got cash and non-cash costs, which is really important. So our non-cash costs are things like imputed labour and depreciation, and also inventory change. So livestock inventory change, feed and water inventory change over the year are also factored in. And, you know, once we've got our gross farm income and take away the costs in the business, that leaves us with our profit. So the average profit for New South Wales this year was $1.71 per kilo milk solids. That's down, it was about $2.07 in the previous financial year. And that translates to a 3.5% return on total assets managed. So return on total assets is owned and leased assets in the Farm Monitor methodology. We had 33 of the 36 farms achieved a positive profit in the year. And it's also worth noting, you know, we've got all those previous years of performance. Our long-term average for New South Wales in terms of operating profit EBIT is $1.16. So strong incomes, high, and the margins being slightly reduced by the higher costs that have been experienced throughout the year. In terms of wealth, you know, this tells us whether a business is growing their assets and resources that they own, so their equity position. We saw improved equity position for 30 of the 36 farms, and the average equity went from 70% to 74% in this financial year. Just a bit of an overview on the state profitability. The main impact the main driver of performance and the impact on performance this year in New South Wales really was the flooding and the prolonged wet conditions, and I'll show you a bit more information on that as we go through the presentation. But it really impacted our feed base. We had farms that lost stored hay and silage as a result of flooding, but also obviously we've had the impact of not being able to get on paddocks, and the timing of these rain events meant that many farmers lost, you know, there were maize crops that weren't harvested, there was other pasture silage that wasn't able to be made into silage. People just could not get onto paddocks. Then we've had the follow-on impact of not being able to graze paddocks, not being able to get on and sow paddocks when people normally would have, and very delayed sowings because of the wet conditions. You know, particularly around that autumn period, we've seen farmers sow, you know, even towards the end of winter, just because they couldn't get onto paddocks. The milk and livestock prices I've mentioned, you know, they have been strong throughout the course of the year. Strong milk prices, strong livestock trading conditions, which have really benefited the businesses across the year. So our gross farm income was up by about 3.6% on the previous year, but the costs, so our total costs were up by about 7.3%. So that's total operating costs of variable and overhead costs. And that was influenced by having to purchase more feed in, as I mentioned earlier. We were fortunate, weren't fortunate, but those farms that were in local government areas that were impacted by the flooding and the wet conditions were able to receive grants, and the grants enabled them to purchase in fodder and also undertake repairs and maintenance work. There were some sizable grants accessed by farmers, and you know, quite a few of them have said if without those grants, they, you know, some of them just wouldn't have been able to feed livestock because they lost any of their sort of feed base. So those grants did play a significant role in business continuity for many of the farmers impacted. So yes, much more purchased feed in general on farms in this year. There were 7 farms in the north that reported a combined total of 500 tonnes of dry matter of lost stored fodder, so hay and silage. Obviously, we can't quantify through Farm Monitor the impact of lost, you know, pasture graze, loss of crops in the paddock, but you know, it was significant. We did see across the year half of the 36 farms drew down on their fodder inventories across the year, but by the end of the year, the other half were able to increase their fodder inventory. And with the wet conditions with fertiliser use, it's interesting to see that fertiliser use decreased on average by about 20% across the state, but the actual dollar spend increased by 3%, total dollars spent. Obviously, as a reflection of the high unit prices for fertiliser that we saw, which they peaked very high during that year. They are still at quite high levels, not as high as they have been, but they're still high. And obviously with wet conditions playing an impact on being able to get onto paddocks, that's reduce the amount of fertilizer that was applied, but also that cost component has, hampered the amount of fertilizer that was applied on paddocks. We also saw fuel and oil costs increase on a dollars per kilo milk solids basis, and again that was reflective of the high pricing that we saw in the year and continue to see. Our herd and shed costs, but predominantly our herd costs, we saw increases there. A couple of reasons for that: wet conditions again. People were having to treat for lameness and mastitis and other, herd health issues as a result of the wet conditions. So we saw an increase in expenditure in that area. But we are also seeing great uptake of the use of sex semen on farms, which is also contributing to that. And our overhead costs, we saw about a 10% increase on average in overhead costs, mainly driven by an increase in labour costs in that situation. So, yeah, our $1.71 down from $2.07 in the previous year, average EBIT of around $398,000 per farm. Remembering that is not just a cash, that's cash and non-cash factors driving that. Once we take out our interest and lease costs, that gives us our net farm income, and that $1.71 translated into a 3.5% return on total assets for the state. There are regional differences. The blue line is our north cohort, and the green line, blue line is the south cohort. The green line is the north cohort. So the north this year averaged $2.08 per kilo milk solids, and the green $1.33. And you'll recall earlier I said that the New South Wales long-term average EBIT is $1.16. So it's, good gross margins have helped drive some of that performance this year. I just wanted to share the rainfall graph. So this is for the 36 farms in the data set and their average rainfall across the year. So average rainfall being taken from the nearest weather station, Bureau's weather station. We can see, we had this wet period here, which was, there was flooding both along the coast in various regions, but also inland regions. Our Central West region, they saw flooding during this period as well. And then we've come into sort of late summer, early autumn, which is, really bad timing for flooding, but often when we tend to get it, particularly when we get these East Coast lows coming through. And, just incredible amounts of rain that were falling in, many of our dairying regions. They're the spikes. I guess the real issue, one of the other issues is this prolonged period of wet conditions, over 6 months for many of the farms, which has really impacted on their ability to run their businesses as they would like to normally. It's also worth mentioning, this is just, a financial year. Back the previous year, there were pretty wet conditions in that previous year as well. This graph shows historical fertiliser usage in our Dairy Farm Monitor farms, and this is our 21-22 year, so we can see, quite a marked reduction in fertiliser application, as I mentioned earlier. We start to look at some of these regional differences. So this is our profit on the left. The blue diamonds are the north farms and the orange diamonds are the south farms. So we can see there is certainly variation in the performance of all farms in the data set. The farms down the bottom here, their performance really was heavily impacted by flooding and wet conditions, and the farms sort of in the top performers in this year tended to be more inland farms where, I'm talking a lot about the wet conditions that were experienced, but in some dairying regions, it was actually relatively good season where they weren't exposed to that significant prolonged wet period. They actually had some good operating conditions. So to tease them apart a little further, our feed base with the reliance on imported feed in the north, we saw 4% less energy coming from homegrown feed this year. It was an average of 58% of homegrown feed in the diet compared to the previous year with 62%. Obviously significant impacts on herd health and production. The next graph I will show the sort of production intake in the north from the Dairy Australia's reports. And farm infrastructure impacts. Obviously with the flooding, there were significant impacts on some farms with laneway washout, loss of fences, and obviously loss of pastures as well. And sorry, back to the herd health costs, there was a 10% increase in herd health costs in the north as a result of mainly of the wet conditions. Gross farm income, as I've mentioned, it was very strong with our strong milk prices and livestock trading. It's the highest in 11 years in nominal terms. Once adjusted for inflation, it's the second highest in the 11 years in New South Wales. So margins obviously were reduced due to those higher costs, and total operating costs were up 8% in the north. So just to break it down again, $1.33 EBIT down from $1.59 in the previous year, and that transferred through to a 2.4% return on total assets managed. This graph, apologies for the blurriness, but this is taken directly from Dairy Australia's milk production report, and this is for the north. We can see the orange line is the 21-22 financial year, the blue line the year before, where again it was also a wet year, and we can see, once obviously we had those, the wet starting here and significant wet in this period, and we can see the impact as that sort of flowed through in the herd in terms of milk production in the northern region. That's about a 15% decrease on the production in the year before with May and June there. So not good. And this is New South Wales milk production, total milk production has declined since the 18-19 financial year, and in those intervening years, we've had some really challenging times with drought, cumulative years of drought, and now, unfortunately, a couple of wet years. So if we look at the south performance, again, feed base impact. I guess the challenge with the south is that we've got south coastal farms, we've got south inland farms. Again, the inland farms did experience wet conditions and flooding at various points in the year. The impact on the south coastal farms, I would say, was more severe than on those inland farms. But so when we're looking at the results here, it is a blend of those two sort of distinct regions. But so on average, the feed base, the amount of feed that was, or energy that came from homegrown feed, was similar to the previous year in the south, but we still did have an increase in herd health costs and declines in milk productions. And again, I'll show you the graphs for the two separate regions, but herd health costs, there was that mastitis and lameness impact again on these businesses. And also, the use of sex semen increasing costs in a herd health area. Farm infrastructure, we had one farm in the data set that reported having to replace or commence replacing laneways and fences 3 times, the same laneways, the same fences, just finished or nearly finished, and another body of water had come through. So it's been really tough. And I think this is important to mention across all the regions, the impact that it has had on people. There's people behind these businesses. They've had cumulative years of drought, fire, a couple of very wet years. So it is very draining on the farmers involved in running these businesses. And we did see a number of farms opt out of Dairy Farm Monitor this year. They just didn't have the capacity or even the time to put the energy and the effort into pulling some numbers together for data collection, which is completely understandable. However, gross farm incomes the same as in the north. Strong milk prices, great livestock trading conditions. So they were again up about 4%. Our total operating costs, however, also increased, again impacting that profit position across the south. So yeah, that translated into a $2.08 EBIT in the north, down from the previous year of $2.62, which all translates all the way through to a 4.7% return on total assets managed. Here is our milk production from Dairy Australia, the milk intake. Again, there have been impacts of the wet conditions in the inland region, but not as severe as what we've seen in the south. And again, we've got that differential here as all these, see, we do get instant impacts when we get flooding and wet conditions, but we get impacts that take time to flow through, and we are seeing that. And unfortunately, with further wet conditions, and also particularly with the inland region, we've seen more declines in milk intake in this current financial year. When we collect the data from the participating farmers, we also survey them in a few areas. One is their expectation for profit or performance in the year ahead, so which is the current year that we're actually in. It's important to remember that when we're surveying the farmers, it's sort of around July, August that they're being asked these questions. I think we've got a context when the questions are being asked with the responses that we get. But we do see that in general, there's a positive outlook around profit expectations for the year. So the orange is our north and the blue is the south. Generally expecting improved conditions, or at least remaining stable. But we do see that we've got variation or differences between the north and the south. And I suspect a lot of, the lower expectations in the north were because of the 12-month period that farmers had been through in terms of operating conditions and higher costs. We also ask them to rank in order of importance the main issues they see facing their business. And we ask them to do that for the next 12 months, so this 22-23 financial year. And we also ask sort of a longer term view about what they see as their main issues in the coming 5-year period. So 47% of respondents indicated that seasonal conditions was their main concern. And this was then followed by input costs and labour. When we look at that with a longer horizon, there is a shift. Input costs and labour are equally ranked as their main issue, followed by seasonal conditions. So obviously responses are flavoured by the situation that farmers are dealing with at the time of the question is asked. So further to this, I've sort of given a high level summary of the performance in New South Wales. We do have our annual report, which is now available online, and an infographic, which is also available online. They sit both on the Dairy Australia website and our DPI, Dairy Business Advisory Unit website. So I'd encourage you to take a look at those. And I will also acknowledge we have had a change in the layout and formatting of the annual report this year, and to make it easier, well, we hope easier and easier to digest for people looking at the report. So have a look, and happy to take any feedback on what you think of the new layout. And we must acknowledge Agriculture Victoria. They were sort of the drivers behind the change in that layout, which took a bit of work, but I think it looks quite good. It's much more visual way of looking at the results rather than a plethora of tables. In New South Wales, we've also got our interactive report, which sits on our website. So it's a high level look at the performance for the farm monitor within each financial year. You can filter in this. This is just a screenshot, so I can't do it here, but you can filter by region, by, you know, across the whole state. You can filter financial year, and all the metrics will change. So encourage you to have a look at that resource as well. It's just a nice way to look at the results visually. So yes, annual report is available on our DPI Dairy website and also the Dairy Australia website. They go to the same place. Dairy Australia has all the historical annual reports and infographics available for New South Wales and the rest of Australia as well on their website. I will do a podcast on the results, which will be released on the 1st of January, which I'm sure that's what everyone would love to do on the 1st of January. Look at, listen to the Business of Dairy podcast. I'd certainly encourage you to. We did the same last year with the performance results for Farm Monitor, a podcast summary, interactive report. And also, if you go to our website, I've mentioned a couple of times that we did a sort of a deep dive into 10 years of Farm Monitor results in New South Wales, looking at the results in a slightly different manner to how we report on in Dairy Farm Monitor each year, but sort of looking at the top 25% farms in New South Wales and some of the key features of those businesses. So take a look at that. Whoops. And thank you. That's the presentation. I would like to again sincerely thank the farmers that participate in the project. Without them, we've got nothing, and it is you know, it takes a bit to get the information together. It's a rigorous process of toing and froing to get the reports as accurate and reflective of the business as we possibly can. And also thank you to all the data collectors for your time in this toing and froing spent with the farmers. It is greatly appreciated. And again, thank you to Dairy Australia again for our continued partnership in the project. So thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen so we can.
Great. Thanks very much, Sheena. That was a really great summary. Look, there's no questions in the chat yet, so maybe I'll kick things off with a question if that's all right. I've got one.
Sure.
Look, I know in the past you've mentioned the top 25%, and I don't know if I don't think I saw it in this presentation. I'm just wondering, were there any characteristics or differences that you pulled out this year for the top 25%? Or was it any different to what you found in other previous years with the top 25?
Yes, so we do report on the top 25% each year, and that the top 25% is ranked on return on total assets managed. So this year, the 9 farms in that data set. I guess one thing that has stood out to me about the farms in that cohort this year is they're pretty much all inland farms. There's only one coastal farm in that group, which, you know, isn't surprising given conditions. In terms of, you know, a few numbers, as our sort of 10-year analysis showed, they don't get the highest milk price. Their average milk price was $8.53 compared to $9.13 for the New South Wales average. They did have a strong livestock trading position, similar to the New South Wales average, but their feed costs, their variable costs were lower, as they usually are per kilo milk solids, as were total overhead costs. So their average EBIT was $2.65, which is, you know, pretty healthy. And you saw on where I'd split north and south farms with the diamonds, you know, there was some really strong EBITs in that cohort, you know, up around $4.
Yeah, there's some pretty strong returns in there. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sheena. Any other questions? I just noticed there's a comment from Nat here. If it's possible to repost the interactive dashboard in the chat. I don't know if maybe Juani or
Juan, are you able to do that? Juan is the brains behind all that.
King.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that'd be great. Thanks, Juan. Any other questions? Feel free to just take yourself off mute or put your hand up or anything there if you've got any comments or questions.
Just, I guess, shout out to people, if there are farmers on the call that are interested in becoming a farm monitor farm, feel free to get in touch with me. You know, I do need to sort of try and keep balance in where farms are and the type of farm system and the size they are, because we do like to keep it try to keep it as representative as we can of the New South Wales industry. So I don't want to be too heavily weighted in a particular region, but yeah, if there are farmers that are interested, please get in touch, because as a participating farmer, you get some excellent information about your business.
I have another question, Sheena, given if nobody else has another one, is like when I look at the average return on total assets and 33 out of the 36 farms achieving a positive return on assets and 30 out of 36 improving the equity position, when we reflect back on the year and the conditions, I don't know, it's somehow surprising in a sense. Any comments from farmers on that?
No. Would you like me to make a comment here?
Yep.
I think, you know, there still has been, we've still, despite the challenging conditions, we've still seen farms reinvest back in the business or reduce debt where they've been able to. So, you know, we do have farms that are doing quite well, and I think it illustrates optimism within the industry. We're still seeing farmers acquire more land or upgrade dairies and things like that. So there's, despite the challenges, people, I think, you know, still see the dairy industry as a strong one and an opportunity where they can continue to grow their businesses in whatever way, you know, that is suitable for them. But we are still certainly seeing that. And reflecting on the previous financial year, you know, we even had the situation where, in terms of lease land, we actually had farms that already had leased land, but they changed the leased land to better quality leased land as a result of, you know, the conditions. We have got strong milk prices, strong livestock trading conditions, which I think is, you know, it sends good signals to farmers. And I would caveat that with saying everything goes in cycles. It won't always be like that, but, you know, there's good conditions at the moment, for sure. Apart from weather.
Yeah, any other questions? Here we go. Juan's just posted the link in the chat to the interactive table, which is really great. You can kind of play around with different factors there, comparing this year to other years and that kind of thing. Sheena, I've just got, I mean, there's differences between north and south, and notice that the EBIT on average is higher in the south than the north. And I know you probably discussed this before, but what are the main kind of reasons for that occurring on average over the years, that the north are often returning higher profits than, I mean, the south returning higher profits than the north? Or has that been consistently the case for the last year on year?
It has been, apart from one year, which was a drought year, which the south was really impacted, and they actually had a lower EBIT than the north. But yeah, look, predominantly the south do have a stronger EBIT, and we're talking on average. Obviously, there's variation between farms.
Yeah.
It's multifactorial. Some of it has to do with the resources available to the farmers, the size of the farms. So, you know, we're talking about profit per kilo milk solids. So they're able to drive efficiencies within their business. It gives them that better return. We tend to have smaller farms in the north. Again, this is just a generalisation. And often on those smaller farms, we see that we have a larger component of imputed labour. So while it's not a cash cost in the business, when we're reporting on profit and EBIT. It is a cost to the business, and that tends to be a bit higher in the north. I guess, you know.
Sheena, you've
New South
lost
Wales.
me. There we go. There she's back.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I've got you now. It's all good.
Right. Sorry. Yeah, we've got a lot of farms that do have a lot of intergenerational labour on the farm as well. Yeah, look, it really is multifactorial. I think Julie just put a comment.
Yeah.
It's a lot to do with ours. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So obviously in the north you've got those tropical pastures. You've got the heat conditions. I mean, we get heat conditions in the south as well, but you know, much more humid up in the north as well. And when you've got, as Julie said, you know, perhaps some lower quality feed, when you've got heat conditions, it's really hard to, well, it can be a challenge to keep the energy levels up to the herd to maintain milk production. So it really is multifactorial. There's lots of different reasons.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sheena. Right, any other questions or comments for Sheena? And a bit quiet out there.
Soaking it all in.
That's right, a lot to absorb. Well, I think everyone's had an opportunity, unless there's anything final to come through on the chat or anyone to speak up.
Feel free to, yeah, people can reach out afterwards if
that's
you'd like
right.
to.
So Sheena's
ask
available there, and as she mentioned, you know, the report's available on the website and the infographic too for further information. But yeah, look forward to downloading the podcast on the 1st of January, Sheena, as well. For a listen. But
might not be at 6 o'clock, it might be at 6 p.m. Zeta.
That's right, an afternoon listen. But look, thanks everyone, and look, thanks very much, Sheena, for that. I know it's an immense amount of work that goes into pulling that together, and I think it's fantastic for the industry to have that and to have that snapshot, because it has been a big year for all of us, you know, operating conditions wise, but some pleasing results to see in that report as well. So thank you very much, Sheena, for that presentation. So I guess that wraps us up for the session. But before we shoot off, I'd just like to shout out to Nico Lyons, because it's his last day, for those that don't know, with New South Wales DPI. So he's moving across the ocean to New Zealand to take up a position with Dairy NZ as their head of science. And from behalf of the team and I guess all of us in the broader industry, Nico, thanks for everything. You've been fantastic, and it's a big loss for all of us, but we wish you all the best. And we'll be able to email you, no doubt, with your new Dairy NZ email, so you'll be hearing from us.
Thank you very much, Sita, and thank you everyone for all the support over the years. And you are in very good hands, and I will be watching from across the Tasman, and I will be listening to the podcast on the 1st of January.
Sounds good. And yeah, well, thanks everyone for joining. I hope that was valuable, and wish you all the best for the Christmas New Year period. I can't believe it's December, and we'll look forward to touching base with everyone in the new year for the next lot of dairy breakfast with New South Wales DPI and whatever else comes across our desks as well. But thanks very much, everyone. Feel free to reach out anytime.